Underwriting for the Money Doctor Show is provided by Ryan and Casey Liquors, Main Street, Greenfield. Exploring the world one glass at a time. Weld Communications, Marketing and Publicity. Helping businesses spread the word in the Pioneer Valley and beyond. www.weldwords.com.
There's a better life if I could be debt-free, but all my money is a mystery. I was feeling overwhelmed and it was wearing thin when I knocked on the door and heard the doctor's in. Oh, the doctor's in, the doctor's in. She got the right prescription to help you win. Oh, the doctor's in, the money doctor's in.
Hello and welcome to the Money Doctor Show. I'm Dr. Frances Rayam, president of Power Down Debt, a positive debt management company. If you think of rolling hills, lush vegetation, songs sung with a brogue, maybe the sound of a harp, we've got Rosie Caine in the studio with us today to transport us to Ireland for the next 30 minutes. Welcome, Rosie.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
I was just thinking about how where a lot of poor people are in debt following the collapse of the Frances, I think this might be the place for you to roll on into those hills with your magic, with your Power Down Debt magic.
Thanks. I'm just. I'll see what I can do here first.
Yeah. It's been a tough time in Ireland these past few years since the collapse of the so-called Celtic Tiger.
Yeah. Speaking of history in Ireland, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
I'm from a small town north of Dublin called Ardee, County Louth, Ardee. Sounds like rural delivery. And it was a very quiet market town when I was growing up. My dad was a family doctor who used to deliver babies in the middle of the night by putting his suit on over his pajamas.
Oh, funny.
Because God forbid you should be arriving at 3 o'clock in the morning and not look like a doctor. And it was very quiet. Not much going on, and now it's a commuter town, and so it's become a place where people live outside Dublin because Dublin is so expensive to live in.
Sure.
40 miles north, 12 miles from the town of Dundalk, and where the Cores come from, and about 16 miles from the North of Ireland border.
Wow. And you lived there until your
I lived there until
20s,
I lived there until I went to college.
Yep.
And then I went to law school, which was a bit of a debacle for me.
I can't imagine your law school.
Sometimes a debacle is the thing that puts you on the right course.
Right.
So I decided it was not really the best choice for me, and I answered an ad in the paper for a singing job at Bunratty Castle, which is a sort of a famous tourist castle. Medieval banquets go on there, and it was sort of designed to save the west of Ireland in the 60s, and around it was built castle tours, and so ancient castles and dinners in ancient castles was born, and it was very successful. And so the sabbatical that I took from law school ended up being a 40-something year sabbatical. I never went back to it, but it sort of put me on the road to performing and being in the arts, and which I've really enjoyed ever since.
And so have we. Do you remember what song you sung for an audition?
I do.
You do?
I do indeed.
What was it?
Eileen Og, The Pride of Petravore. There was a singer-songwriter called Percy French, and his songs would have been sort of considered parlour songs, and probably excoriated by modern traditionalists and purists. But Maura O'Connell, the wonderful singer, always says, well, you know what my shtick is, all the songs have integrity, they all have value, parlour songs, art songs. But there was a lot of separation between whether you sang art songs or you sang traditional songs, or you were pure enough in the traditional field, and so I belonged to the sort of parlour song repertoire at that time.
Oh my goodness. Certainly we're going to ask you to play, of course. We have to talk about this lever harp that's here a bit. You teach, and can you give us a little history a history of the difference between the harps, the types of harps?
Well, the harp has been around for about 5,000 years. Almost every culture has had a harp. They've had a piece of wood that's this shape with strings attached, and the harp reached its, I think, most sophisticated evolution and repertoire in the Scottish, the countries of Scotland, Ireland and Wales, part of Breton, Cornwall, the northern part of Spain. And in the bardic tradition, these levers didn't exist. The harp would just be tuned into whatever key you needed, and the bards, they played with long fingertips, and it was considered an aristocratic profession. And we have the most music from O'Carolan, who was born in the town of Nobber. And the harp was considered an occupation that was fitting for an aristocratic blind child.
Oh my goodness, really?
A lot of children were blinded by smallpox, as was
Sure.
O'Carolan. And so they put him to the harp in the vernacular of the times when he was 14 years old, which was considered late. And so he played a harp without levers. The levers are a relative innovation. They're about 100 years old. And you flip them and you get a differential in a half a tone.
Right.
And
So all of these levers up here, we'll see them when you play, but aside from playing the strings in chords and melody notes, you have to flip those levers
to get
in order
to get
change
passing tones.
Right.
To get passing tones, and the harp is actually tuned in the key of E flat, if that means
How
anything
convenient,
to anybody.
E flat.
E flat. So there are 3 flats, B, E, and A. So those levers go up when I want to be in the key of C,
Right,
commonly
great.
referred to as the people's key.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's really fun to work with those levers. I came to the harp very late in life. I won't even tell you how late.
Well, I'm going to ask you anyway, because you started on piano.
Yeah, I did, yes. But
And everybody thinks that, piano just is a harp laid on its side, but you
It
don't
is.
have to push any of these levers
No,
in a piano,
no.
and you don't have to tune a piano every time you play it.
No, you do not.
So
No.
tell us, what was that transition for you? from
Well,
the piano
I
to
was
the harp?
I was then, after I had left Bunratty Castle, I was in a trio, which was like a harp sandwich. There was one here and one on this side and the harp in the middle. And so I was around harps all my life, but somehow there was a firewall between me and the harp, and I never really jumped over that firewall till much later, when the trio had dispersed and I was living here in Western Massachusetts. I reconnected with those women with whom I had been in the trio, and the other one on the other side of the sandwich had picked up the harp, and I was astounded. I said, "Alice, you play the harp now?" And she said, "Yeah, I do." And Alice was a kind of a shoot from the hip gal, and she said, "So could you." Nothing really to it. I said, "Is that right? Well, you tell me what you did and I'll be with you." And she said, "Well, I went to this little village in Ireland called Termonfeckin. Even in Ireland, they laugh at a place called Termonfeckin.
We have one in Scotland called Echmechtiecofeckin. Yes.
Well, there was a real Saint Feckin, and he was about a 7th century saint. And there was a school there, started famously by the daughter-in-law of William Butler Yeats. And I said, "I'll be right with you, because my brother lives in the village and it's 7 miles from RD, where I was born." And so I booked for a summer week course, and I thought, I'll do a course for a week and I'll know if it's for me or not. And I think at first pluck, I knew it was for me.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so that's 16 years ago. So there's the timeline. I've been playing for 16 years. I'll start by playing The Fiddler of Dooney, a wonderful Yeats poem, a happy Yeats poem. Yeats was fond of going to the dark side, the mystical side, and he really is fond of musicians, and he's going to elevate his musician, the fiddler, to highest place, because of course musicians are often poorly paid in life. They're going to enter the gates of St. Peter before anybody else. The Fiddler of Dooney. When I play on my fiddle at Dooney, folk dance like a wave o'er the sea. My cousin is priest at Kilfarnet, my brother at Knockerabuie. I passed my brother and cousin, each read in his book of prayer. I read in my book of songs that I bought at the Sligo Fair. When we come at the end of time to Peter sitting in state, he will smile on the three old spirits, but he'll call me first through the gate. For the good are always the merry, saved by an evil chance, and the merry love the fiddle, and the merry love to dance. And when the folk there spy me, they will all come up to me, saying, here's the fiddler, here is the fiddler of Dooney. When I play on my fiddle at Dooney, folk dance like a wave of the sea. My cousin is priest at Kilvarnet, my brother at Margaret. I bless my brother and cousin, each read in his book of prayer. I read in my book of songs that I bought at the Sligo Fair. When we come at the end of time to Peter sitting in state, he will smile on the three old spirits, but he'll call me first through the gate. For the good are always the merry, saved by evil chance, and the merry love the fiddle, and the merry love to dance. And when the folk there spy me, they will all come up to me, saying, here's the fiddler, here is the fiddler of Dooney. They will all come up to me and say, here's the fiddler of Dooney.
I think there was a quote that I read somewhere that you said something about music transcends intellectual or something. Do you remember the quote?
Well, I think it goes right to the heart.
I think that's what it was, something
it
about
does,
that, yeah.
which is why it's more difficult, I think, to connect with modern atonal music, because you have to process it in your head. But a lot of Irish music is, I mean, they're real weepers. You know, all our wars are merry and all our songs are sad.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of weeping into the green beer around St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, when you play "Oh Danny Boy," there's always somebody crying.
There's always somebody crying. Yeah, it feels like, you know, a bit of a cheap trick, but there it is. Sometimes we need it.
Now this is a lever harp, but there are also pedal harps and
Yes.
historic harps and
Yeah, the pedal harp is another innovation of the 1900s. The gilded wonder that you see in the orchestra has all of those key changes within the sound box. You know, there's a big mechanism, and there are foot pedals. So if you want an F sharp, you're in the key of C and you want an F sharp, you put your foot on the F sharp pedal and you get all of them together.
Sure.
Whereas with this one, you know, here's our F sharps. You have to do them individually.
And although this is certainly not portable, it's not an auto harp.
No, it's great. No, it's a great
still big, but
size. It's a great
playable
size.
and
And you know, as we were talking earlier, I was saying I hope I don't have any lever moments, because
Let's talk about lever moments, shall we?
Lever moments mean
Tell
that
us about a
if
lever moment.
You've forgotten to flip your switch back again, your lever back to the neutral position, and of course you play it and it's the wrong note.
Right, it sounds like you're out of tune.
Yeah,
Right.
it sounds like, you know, you've just hit the wrong note.
And they're quite
So-
common, right? I mean,
of
that's
course
a
they
lot
are.
of movement.
Yes, but
play
it's
the
it's really very challenging if you don't start to play the harp, you know, as a child, which I didn't. It's really, the harp has all sorts of possibilities. It has harmonic possibilities. It has percussion possibilities. So I didn't start playing early enough to be able to play jigs and reels like they do, like youngsters do. I mean, they just fly. Their fingers just fly on jigs and reels.
Yes.
And they're sort of competing with fiddles for speed.
Right.
And then, you know, I live in a different world. I live in a different world that needs a different kind of repertoire. So I like to draw from, well, the Beatles and Broadway songs and some of the tradition. And so I've got the freedom, because after all, I'm American now.
Yes.
And that confers on me certain musical freedoms.
Well, certainly, you're from Ireland originally, and we can't, you know, we love the brogue, everybody loves your accent. You are, I think Dan Chilati actually said that you were the real deal, a walking St. Patrick's Day figure or something. I'm sure he said it more eloquently than I did, but the real deal was what we all agreed on. But you live in
That's nice.
Greenfield now.
I do. Yeah.
Rose Muffin.
Oh, Lord. That's
Tell me about Rose Muffin.
That's my husband. Well, if anybody follows him on Facebook, I have to follow him on Facebook because I have to censor him on Facebook. So he's on Facebook every other day, and we've got 5 grandchildren. Oh, God forbid that I should be a boring grandmother, but
No,
here
let's
I go.
say hello to them.
Here I go.
Okay.
5 grandchildren under 5.
Wow.
And beg your pardon, 5 under 2 years of age. So of course there's a posting every other day, and there's a baby or there's
Yes.
a toddler. And I said, you know, Howard, there's about 3 people in the world that have the slightest interest in your grandchildren. Yourself, myself, and one other. I said, don't be ridiculous. I have about 80 followers.
Yes, followers.
Because his
great.
postings are amusing.
Oh, I'm
But he
sure.
took a picture of me sleeping the other day with a baby, and I said, you know, I can't take my eye off him. And I don't mean the baby.
Oh, yes.
And I can't take my eye off him.
Funny. We're going to take a break for a moment, but when we come back, let's talk about your composing, singing, playing, teaching, all of that. Who knows, NPR and anything else that comes to mind.
Whatever you would like, Frances. You're a great talker.
Thanks, I'm having a blast. We'll come back in a moment.
Underwriting for the Money Doctor Show is provided by Dr. Glenn Brooks at the office of Glenn Brooks and Spa on the Green. 413-565-4400. drglennbrooks.com. Video broadcast services. Complete marketing services for your business. 480-200-4222. Videobroadcastservices.com. Richard Wiedegartner, LMT, Neuromuscular Massage Therapy. For pain relief, call 413-773-5775. rwmassagetherapy.com. Magic Wings Butterfly Conservatory. 4,000 butterflies flying year-round. 413-665-2805. MagicWings.com.
I'd like to play a song that commemorates the end of the Irish monarchy and the death of Brian Boru, an assassination, a plot that was hatched by his ex-wife, who was a piece of work, Gormley, the last High Queen of Ireland. It was in 1014, which in Irish memory is really not that long, only 1,000 years. His son and his grandson were killed in the battle, and this is my memorial piece for Brian Boru.
The last Queen of Ireland.
The last High Queen.
The last High Queen of
Yes.
Ireland. Tell me a little bit about what's going on for you with that.
That was commissioned by Old Deerfield Productions, and the librettist was a woman called Talia Delaney, and I wrote the music for it. And it was actually, the idea came from Judge Michael Ryan, who is a great ingester of Irish culture and history. And he came to me after I had done a concert in Northampton and said, the next woman you should write about is Gormley, the third wife of Brian Boru. And I had never heard of her. And I was just, I was mortified. I came
that you hadn't heard of her?
I was really mortified that I was so ignorant. But I needn't be so mortified because nobody else in Ireland knew about her either.
Well, I was just about to point out, I don't know about Ireland, but I had no idea who she was, right?
And I didn't know that Brian Boru had been married 3 times. And so it was a very slim hysterical novel about Gormley. And the story was really a riveting story, and it had everything. It had, you know, the woman scorned, the beautiful, dramatic diva, the high maintenance, the two other husbands, married to the Viking prince. I mean, it had everything that you could possibly want for a musical. Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of musicals and things that you're working on, Wild Irish Women, you have something coming up in Greenfield.
The Wild Irish Women of James Joyce
Okay.
is the most recent piece, and it's just at the stage now where it's a staged reading. We actually did it for first night at the Christian Science Church. And so the songs that I've written are the songs that pertain to James Joyce's relationship with his wife and how that relationship gave birth to his literary wife, the famous or infamous Molly Bloom, and his sad and persistently adoring and loving relationship with his daughter Lucia, who was an Isadora Duncan dancer, but became schizophrenic in her mid-20s. And so far I've got those three women, and then Sylvia Beach, the woman who published Ulysses, who started Shakespeare and Company, the famous bookstore in Paris, and another woman, Harriet Weaver, who was his patron.
Wow.
So those songs for those two women are still in progress.
And that's going to be at the Arts Block in April.
Friday, April 11th.
April 11th. We had a little magic happen in our studio this trip around. We had Dan Shalati, the poet, in the studio at the same time that we had you here. And on the spur of the moment, you were both willing, very graciously, to try and put something together. So I want to close the show out with a piece of music that you played. And I think you made up along the way. It wasn't anything recognizable to me. Was it instant?
I think it was just the idea that Dan was going to, he was going to recite a Yeats fairy poem that put me into kind
fairy
of
song.
Fairy fingers.
It was great. And so I'm grateful to you both for doing that. We'll close the show out with a piece. I just want to say, until our next chat, Rosie Caine, Dan Shalati, and I are all going to remind you to keep it positive.
A fairy song. We who are old, old and gay, oh so old. Thousands of years if all were told. Give to these children, new from the world's silence and love, and the long dew-dropping hours of the night and the stars above. Give to these children, new from the world, rest far from men. Is anything better? Anything better? Tell us it then, us who are old, old and gay, oh so old. Thousands of years, if all were told.
There's a better life if I could be debt free, but all my money is a mystery. I was feeling overwhelmed and it was wearing thin when I knocked on the door and heard the doctor's in. Oh, the doctor's in, the doctor's in. She got the right prescription to help you win. Oh, the doctor's in, the money doctor's in.